design and construction. And what I'm going to really talk about today is really how we can use other tools to build out, just as Paul said, that mass timber ecosystem we need in order to be able to build affordable, sustainable, beautiful mass timber buildings, and also to be able to manufacture and fabricate the mass timber that we need domestically using sustainably harvested forest materials and wood. So that's what we're going to talk about today. With that, I will go into what's going to happen. So yeah, first we'll talk just a little bit about how I caught that mass timber bug, just building on what Paul shared with you. I'm going to introduce our program, MassTimber at MSU, briefly. Talk about the history of mass timber interest in Michigan. So really understanding like how that came to be, what happened between then and now, how we're working specifically to advance mass timber in Michigan, particularly through using our mass timber structure as a learning laboratory, by convening learning and networking opportunities for mass timber stakeholders in Michigan, whether they know they're mass timber stakeholders yet or not, engaging on policy to advance mass timber, as well as matching industry priorities and needs with our research at MSU. And then finally, I'll just share a little bit about where we are with mass timber in Michigan today. So I have a feeling everybody on this call knows what mass timber is, but anytime I give a presentation, no matter how much I think people know about mass timber, somebody at the very end says, what do you actually mean by mass timber? And then I feel really, really bad that I didn't explain it sooner. So level setting. When we talk about mass timber, we're basically using an umbrella term for a variety of engineered wood building construction materials. The ones people are really excited about right now, cross-laminated timber, glue laminated timber, dowel laminated timber, they're all made from dimensional lumber that's laid up in layers with adhesive, generally, not always adhesive, but usually adhesive between the layers, and they're pressed in a big hydraulic press to create different structural properties and use cases. We're excited about mass timber because it allows us to build more sustainably. Sometimes we can achieve efficiencies and cost savings in construction. And anybody who's been in a mass timber building will tell you they are very special and very beautiful and nice to be in. So those are kind of that's the main value proposition for mass timber. So now that we're all on the same page. Again, as Paul said, I'm Sandra Lupien. I'm the director of MassTimber at MSU. I spent a bunch of time working in the nonprofit and public sector, mostly on all these different types of climate, environment, and community development issues. I think I like to share this with people because often I'm asked, like, you don't have a construction background, you're not a forester, how the heck did you even get interested in mass timber? And it really is through that lens of climate and sustainability. And I'm really drawn to it because, you know, the way that mass timber gets at sustainability and climate resilience and greenhouse gas mitigation is by really uniting forests in the built environment. And for me, that's a very exciting thing. I was pursuing a Master of Public Policy at UC Berkeley, which I started in 2016. And this is when I got interested in mass timber. So I had a friend who was telling me about his furniture that he had built out of Colorado beetle kill pine. And I thought that was really exciting to learn about furniture made from wood that was otherwise going to burn or rot in forests after it was killed by beetles that had infested forests. Together, he and I decided we were going to start a furniture company in California. It was called Sapphire Pine, and we were making furniture out of California beetle kill pine. Our goal was really, we come from an advocacy background, so maybe we're not the best business people. Our goal was, let's tell the story that this wood is valuable, it's durable, and it's beautiful. And if we use it in a long-lived, durable product like furniture, we're going to store the carbon that's in that wood for the life of this product. And people got really excited about the story we were telling, and we were making furniture and selling furniture and quickly realizing that, you know, this is a lot of fun. And the scale of our solution is like a billionth of a spit in all of the oceans of the world in terms of the scale of the problems that our forests in California are facing. So we thought, what else can you do with that wood? And that's when we learned about mass timber. That was in, I would say, early 2017. And we thought, wow, we're in this incubator. How can we pivot to manufacturing mass timber? And anybody who's in the forest product space or manufacturing space is like, that is a pie in the sky idea going from where you were to there. And we learned that that was the case as well. But in the process of exploring the business side of that, we realized that we were trying to use low value woods that didn't have existing markets. So probably policy interventions would be really helpful for addressing that. And we were in a public policy program. So that's why I decided to do my thesis on how could California remove the barriers to the adoption and manufacture of mass timber. Needless to say, we decided we weren't going to manufacture mass timber, but I was completely obsessed by that point. By the time I finished my thesis, I knew I wanted to work on mass timber all the time. And like I said, I tried to get the state of California to hire me to do it. That didn't happen. I did spend a couple of years working with amazing people on other important topics in the state of California. But when this position at Michigan State University came about to lead a program really focused on advancing mass timber, I said, that's the one for me. And I'm a Michigan native. I grew up here. I spent 24 years of my life here before moving away for 20. So it was really exciting to come back and be able to take what I'd learned and build and like really use my advocacy and policy and engagement skill set to do this here. So I want to start by talking a little bit about how did we even get to the point where we have a person leading a program called MassTimber at MSU, like the person who's basically this cheerleader for mass timber in Michigan. Why did that happen? So in 2016 or in 2017, right around the time that I was in California getting bit by the mass timber bug, that was what was happening in Michigan. Select Michiganders were starting to get bit by the bug. So people at the Michigan Department of Natural Resources saw mass timber as an exciting rural economic development opportunity. Can we have mass timber manufacture in the state that uses Michigan wood? And then can we be fabricating that here using all of our, history of value-added fabrication and manufacturing in Michigan to do that? That was the exciting value proposition for the Department of Natural Resources. Folks at the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development similarly got excited with DNR and thought, wow, this seems like an opportunity we should be exploring. At the same time, they started reaching out to my colleagues at Michigan, my colleagues who were not yet my colleagues at Michigan State University, saying, what do you know about mass timber? This seems like an exciting opportunity. And my colleagues said, we don't know much yet, but we're going to find out. And then friends at the Michigan Forest Biomaterials Institute, which is a nonprofit organization, started getting interested in mass timber. Colleagues at Michigan Tech became interested in mass timber. So everybody just started talking, amongst each other about, okay, this is something that makes so much sense for Michigan. What is this? What's the there, and how do we proceed? So that was catching the bug in 2016, 2017. And so then folks at Michigan State University started thinking about, okay, so what about having some mass timber at MSU? And at that time, our university was getting ready to build a new STEM teaching and learning facility, a new classroom and laboratory facility for Gateway, so those entry courses that all freshmen and sophomores need to take in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. This was going to be a really high profile kind of landmark building on our campus. They're building it next to our Spartan Stadium, which is the place on campus that people probably know best. And folks in our forestry department, especially our chairperson, Dr. Richard Kobe, along with my colleague in our construction management program, Dr. George Berghorn, said, what if this building was made of mass timber? What if this could be the first major mass timber structure in Michigan and establish MSU as a leader in the mass timber space in Michigan, and also give us a project in Michigan that we can really use perhaps as a teaching tool? So big vision. They went to our university's administration and said, what about this idea? And, the first answer, as you might expect, was no, why? And then they went back again and the answer was still no. And then they went back again and they spoke with, somebody who got their vision and caught the bug and said, yeah, we should absolutely put this on the menu. So the project team working on our building investigated mass timber. Basically, our building actually is a mass timber and steel hybrid structural system. That system, or should we go with the steel and concrete structural system as originally planned? What are the trade-offs? What are the cost differentials? And after doing that analysis, realized that it would only cost 2% more to do a mass timber and steel hybrid structure for this particular building. And that the perceived return on investment, that is to say, a lot of intangible things, right? The ability to get great publicity about the building, to establish some leadership, to create a landmark, but also to create a building that's extremely beautiful and appealing for students. All of those reasons made them decide, yeah, we're going to go with mass timber. So that was an exciting moment for what's happening with mass timber in Michigan right now. We all, our state partners, folks at MSU, people in the industry, all look to our STEM facility and say, that was really the catalyst for the work that we're able to be doing now. So important to note, and universities are well positioned often to take a leadership role in these spaces, right? Because they're able to try new things. We were able to get significant funding support from the Michigan State Legislature to build the building because they were excited about the mass timber for the project. So all of these pieces really came together to create some momentum around this building that has paid off in many different ways that we'll discuss. So with that decision made, it was time to then move forward with, the next steps for mass timber in Michigan. So we started moving into, or they, my colleagues before me, started moving into organizing and strategizing around mass timber. A broad, like a multidisciplinary, multi-sector group created a mass timber sprint team that was organized through the Michigan Department of Natural Resources. And that team still goes today. I now facilitate that team, really just to make sure that people had a monthly touch base point to talk about where are we now, what have we learned today, what are some ideas that we should, pick up and run with, etc. The formation of that team led to the planning of a Michigan Mass Timber Summit that ended up taking place online in early 2021. It was going to be in person, but COVID prevented that from happening. That was an important moment. It also really led to the identification of a strong need to prioritize market development. If, as the state wanted, if the state wanted a mass timber manufacturing facility, anyone who was going to consider manufacturing mass timber in Michigan was going to need to see demonstrated demand for these materials in Michigan, but also the surrounding region. So there was really a need to start developing those markets. So there were two things that really came to light. One was, how can we leverage our MSU STEM facility to help create and support the development of that market demand? And then with that was the realization that we really need a full-time person to be kind of driving that market development and leveraging the STEM facility as a learning laboratory for market development and more. So in 2020 to 2021, MSU and our state partners began moving forward with implementation of this plan. The STEM building was under construction at this time. People were watching it go up, even it was COVID, so not as many people saw it as possible, but people would drive onto campus or take their walker run through campus and say, wow, what is that amazing new structure that's going up? What's going on with all of that wood? They did hold the Michigan Mass Timber Summit, as I mentioned. I think about 200 people attended that virtually, representing government, industry, NGOs, academia. And it was very much a learning summit, right? Like, let's learn about mass timber together. So they talked about the construction, the design, the engineering aspects of it, as well as sourcing and manufacturing, and a lot of the carbon, climate, and sustainability elements. And that solidified people's interest in mass timber. They developed a position and decided to place that position at MSU, the position I currently occupy, and began recruiting for it. And then in July of 2021, the Michigan State University STEM teaching and learning facility was completed, and it opened to students for summer semester. And I joined Michigan State University as director of mass timber at MSU, and we launched the program and were able to immediately start leveraging our STEM facility as a learning laboratory. So just here's some pictures of our building. This is when it, obviously, when it was under construction. We call it Michigan's first major mass timber building. For a while, we thought we were the first building to use cross-laminated timber, and then we realized about a year in that we were wrong. There's a church, a really beautiful church in Ann Arbor that is actually the first building to use mass timber in Michigan, but ours is certainly the largest building and the most, it gets the most use. It's the most well-known. So this is this building used to be a coal-fired power plant that provided energy for our campus until the early 70s, and it was decommissioned then and just sat vacant. So the designers and the university took an adaptive reuse approach to creating this new building, retaining the 60,000 square foot core structure of the building. So there's a lot of the original steel there. If you visit the building or take an online tour of the building, you'll see that one of the original boilers is in place. So there's a lot of opportunity to reflect on kind of this past use of the building, creating energy using a pretty dirty source, and looking at how we're using and creating and producing energy now on our campus. There's opportunities for that. And then there's two new wings of construction to the north and the south of that central core. And that's where you see most of the mass timber in the building. Throughout the building, we use glue laminated timber columns and beams and girders, as well as cross laminated timber floor decks. And then we use mass timber in our stair tower structure as well, very, very tall panels. The new wings are 3 stories high, and the whole building footprint is, or the whole building is, I think, 180,000 square feet. It might be 160,000 square feet. I always say the wrong number, but it's a very beautiful building. Here's a picture just of the inside. So you can see the glue lam here up above this window. You can see a little bit of the CLT floor deck, and you can see how the mass timber interacts with the steel braces to create the lateral resistance system for the building. I will tell you, when people come in this building, the students, when they first started coming in this building, were literally in awe. And I was so surprised to see students just walking in and being, this building is amazing. And it's very, very well used by students. There are collaboration spaces located throughout the building. And it's just a great place to hang out. But it's also, for us with MassTimber at MSU, our key learning tool to really get, like, for experiential learning, for people who want to understand mass timber better. So here's a little bit about how we use the building for that purpose. But first, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about our program. So we created mass timber. Michigan State University created MassTimber at MSU. It's a collaboration across 3 departments within our College of Agriculture and Natural Resources: forestry, the School of Planning, Design, and Construction, and the extension. So again, you can see how we're really, like I like to say, uniting forests with the built environment, really using outreach and stakeholder engagement as our key tool. This is our mission. We mobilize education, science, outreach, communication, and policy to advance both mass timber construction and manufacture in Michigan, as well as the surrounding Great Lakes region. So my job as the program director is to really be out in the community, understanding who's trying to build buildings right now, who's considering mass timber, who's definitely wanting to use mass timber, what barriers are they facing, what opportunities are out there. Okay, how can we, as a land grant university, and that is one that does research, education, and outreach, how can we bring those tools to the table to help either remove barriers or leverage opportunities? And the same is true on the manufacturing side of the equation, right? Who might be a great candidate to manufacture mass timber in Michigan? What do they need to be able to do that? And how can we help them get what they need to make that happen? Importantly, we have received significant funding for our program from the Michigan Department of Natural Resources and the Michigan Department of Agriculture and Rural Development, 2 state agencies that really see mass timber as a key priority for Michigan. And those 2 agencies, along with some others, the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, and some others, are really key partners to us, and we keep in touch with them and collaborate with them basically every step of the way. Our team, I don't want you to think that I'm doing this by myself. Our core team with me is Dr. George Berghorn, who I mentioned earlier. He's an assistant professor in our construction management program and worked for 20 years in the construction industry before kind of pivoting to an academic career. So he is our technical expert, and I could not understate the value that he brings to the program. And he's also serving as our research director for MassTimber at MSU. So I'm the overall program director. He's our research director. And then our affiliated faculty, many in the Department of Forestry are listed there. You can see the different disciplines. We also newly have some affiliated faculty from our College of Engineering, from our School of Packaging, from our supply chain management area. So we're really expanding the disciplines that are under the umbrella of MassTimber at MSU and starting to seek more funding opportunities to leverage those disciplines. Speaking of leveraging, this is how we are leveraging our MassTimber building, the STEM teaching and learning facility, as a learning laboratory. So we get a lot of calls. People will call me and say, hey, I'm an architect or an engineer, or I'm a GC, and my client is asking me for mass timber, and we've never done this before. And we're trying to figure out, how can we bring mass timber? How can we deliver this mass timber the client needs? Can you help us? And the first thing that we always do is say, yes. And please come and visit us at our STEM facility, and we will show you around, and we will help you think through some of the problems that you're grappling with. We'll answer whatever questions we can, and we'll work to connect you with additional resources. Oftentimes these are just tours, like a group will come in and say, yeah, we just want to come and look around, and we want to sit down and talk with you and talk it through. But oftentimes the tour includes like a MassTimber 101 presentation, or something more detailed if they're more experienced or knowledgeable. So we'll reserve a room in the STEM facility, hopefully one that has exposed mass timber in it, and we'll do a presentation there and let people have the experience of learning in the building. And then we'll walk around the building and show them, here's the glue lam, here's the CLT, here's the difference, here's how we use it in the building, here's why. Oh, here's a place where we can look at the layup of this cross-laminated timber and talk about the fire resistance properties. Oh, you want to see how all the connectors work? Sure, we can point that out to you and talk you through that. So we answer a lot of technical questions in our walkthroughs with the architecture, engineering, and construction industry stakeholders. These conversations and tours have proven just invaluable for people working on projects. I can't understate the importance of these, of being able to bring them through our building. This picture here, I think you can see my cursor. I'm going to assume that you can, but it's the top left one. This is I think my favorite tour we ever did. So the city of Lansing is our capital city. Thanks, Katrina. The city of Lansing is our capital city. This is the city located next to East Lansing, where Michigan State University is. And somebody from the building codes agency at the city of Lansing contacted me and said, oh, we heard about your building. We'd like to see it. And I was really nervous. I thought, oh, these building code officials, they're going to be a tough crowd. They're going to be really skeptical. They're not going to like this. They're going to be really concerned about fire resistance. And so we brought them in. You can see them all there, about a dozen folks. We sat them down in this room with exposed mass timber. We started giving a presentation. They were very kind of stone-faced at first, but then as we started talking, I started seeing them like looking around the room at the columns and beams, and getting up and taking pictures of the connectors in the room while we were talking, and then they started having really good questions. And then when we walked out into the hallway and started actually walking through the building, the flashlights came out, and they were just so excited and fascinated by this new building type that they had never been in. And many of them left saying, oh yeah, we got to have this happen for Lansing. We're so excited about this. So, I mean, there's just so much value in being able to bring people into the building. Similarly, we bring forest products industry stakeholders through the building so that they can really understand more about what the mass timber looks like, ask questions about how it's manufactured, and we can connect them to additional resources. The university as a whole, so beyond our small MassTimber at MSU program and our departments, the university as a whole has been really seeing a lot of the buzz that this building is getting, primarily because of the mass timber, and has been starting to put it on tour stops when important VIPs come through campus. So we've got this facility for rare isotope beams on campus, and that's always like the top stop. And now it's the STEM building to talk about the mass timber. And so we've had the ability to interface with a lot of elected officials because of this, and including when our new state legislators, all of the freshman state legislators took office recently. I was able to give a tour to probably half of those new state legislators before they even really started their term. So it was like they learned about mass timber before they even started, and I could see them excited and see the wheels turning. So really important to educate the legislators as well. And then of course students, whether they're students from MSU, like I'm giving a tour to an engineering class this week, or students from other countries. We had this group of students from Japan come through. Absolutely, it's part of our mission to educate students, and we love taking students on tours of this building. So tours, and presentations. We've also created, for people who can't come to the building, a virtual tour, and it's just a Matterport scan like you would see in a 3D tour on Zillow, except for in a much larger building than you would normally see on Zillow. So that's something we have posted on our website. And if somebody wants to see the building but they can't come, I always direct them to it, or I might jump online with them and do a walkthrough in the virtual space for them. It's very helpful. I think it's not our most important tool, but it was a pretty easy thing to provide, and I think worth it. And then we have a self-guided tour that's evolving. So you can see here on the right side of the picture, the collection of pictures on the screen, there's a sign, "What's with the wood?" And it's some details about why am I seeing all this wood in here? What is this wood? Oh, it's mass timber. Here's what that means. Here's why we're excited about it. And then it talks about some of the sustainability facts. We go into, this is FS Forest Stewardship Council certified wood from Canada, and it's black spruce, and there's this many cubic meters of it in here, and it stores this many metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalents, and that's like not driving the average car 4.7 million miles. Like, so making obviously relatable data, try to say that, relatable data for people to interact with. And then there's a QR code on the poster, and that links to our website, a page on our website that has videos about different elements of mass timber and the construction of this building and the properties of this building, et cetera. And eventually throughout the building, we'll have more, we'll have individual signs with QR codes that go to content about discrete aspects of the building, like, oh, you're in the stair tower. Well, this is a cross-laminated timber panel. Look here, here's how to think about the fire resistance. So really trying to make the most out of this building and its existence on our campus. And I just want to go back real quick. And then the other thing, of course, that we're doing related to this building is we're pitching stories to the media so that we can be amplifying the story of this building, the excitement about this building, the importance of this building, but more importantly, why mass timber matters and how it's an opportunity for Michigan. So we've had a lot of placement in print and digital and a lot of podcast type media, et cetera. And then the building has won quite a few awards that we've submitted it for. So for example, it won the Forest Stewardship Council Leadership Award in 2021. It won one of the Woodworks Wood Design Awards. And excitingly, and this was a surprise, it won the Association of General Contractors Grand Award nationally last year. So they don't tell you that's happening in advance. So our project team was there, and it was a really big deal. So, and then we amplify those stories as well to get more leverage. So moving away from the building and leveraging that as a learning laboratory, I just want to talk a little bit about the importance of creating learning opportunities for people, creating networking opportunities for people, and helping facilitate partnerships for folks who want to engage on mass timber. A good amount of the work that we do in this area is focused on the architecture, engineering, and construction side of the equation. However, I would say that there's still a significant amount of work that we're doing on the manufacturing side too. I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment. So here are just some of the things that we've done along these lines to convene learning opportunities and partnerships. Katrina, is there a little black bar in front of my pictures, or are they clear? Okay, cool.
They're clear.
Okay, good. Sometimes you can't tell. So first of all, we host webinars. We do a mass timber webinar, 4 to 6 of them per year. We've been doing these in partnership with the Michigan Forest Biomaterials Institute on a variety of different mass timber topics. We really run the gamut. We don't just focus on design. We don't just focus on manufacturing. We don't just focus on policy. It's a little bit of everything. So the photo you see on the right is one that we did with Element 5, the mass timber manufacturer that's located in St. Thomas, Ontario, talking about a new affordable housing model that they have for mass timber. And so just one of the webinars that we do. These are well attended. We record them, and people do watch the recordings, and they often ask about them and tell me about what they learned from them, which is great. We go to the International Mass Timber Conference and we take people with us. So last year, when I started my position, I said, we've got to find a way to bring a bunch of people from Michigan to the International Mass Timber Conference, which happens annually in Portland, Oregon. It was in April last year. It's in March this year. And, this is the biggest mass timber conference, I think, in the world. And it's an amazing opportunity to learn in formal workshops and sessions, to hear great keynote speakers, to network with so many people in the industry, you know, but also there's a great expo space. So if you're, you know, people are looking to source materials for an upcoming project, this is a way to meet like all the manufacturers in one place. So I said, well, if we've got people who are interested in mass timber, even a little bit, or want to learn about mass timber, I'm going to try to get them to go to this conference so that we can all learn together. We can increase our knowledge base about mass timber in Michigan together. We can maintain those connections afterward, and hopefully some people will move from being curious to being, you know, from being like mass timber curious people to being mass timber actors. So let's see what happens. So I thought maybe I would take a dozen people last year. I ended up being able to take 50 people to the International Mass Timber Conference from Michigan. And it was so exciting to be there together. We host a reception for the Michigan group so that people can interact with one another and get to know each other and maybe form new project collaborations and partnerships. But I heard some great things from people afterwards. I heard some people say, wow, well, when we came here, we were excited about mass timber, but now we want to be the leader on mass timber in Michigan. We want our firm to be the leader. Or we just didn't really totally understand how mass timber worked or why it was important, but now we really get it and we want to champion it. So this has been wonderful in terms of getting people excited, getting people more knowledge, and just getting people more bought into mass timber. We're taking another group this year in March. I think we're going to be about 60 this year, and we'll do the same thing, reception, find opportunities for people to collaborate, and then keep in touch afterwards. Really a great opportunity. And we don't pay for them to go, by the way. We do have some discounts available, but they pay their own way. We hosted in December an event that we called the Michigan Mass Timber Update. We did this in our STEM teaching and learning facility. This is a picture. We held it in like one of the only rooms with no exposed mass timber in it, ironically, but that was the big room that was available. We had about 150 people attend. It was about 135 in person and about 15 online from all over the state, people from all different sectors. And we had, the format was not meant to be a deep dive or a 101 or a technical conference. This was an opportunity really for people to just share, this is what I'm working on, this is why it matters, here's a barrier I'm facing, here's how I'm overcoming it. So whether they were in the architecture, engineering, and construction industry, whether it was on the manufacturing side, we had some manufacturers, regional, not Michigan-based because we don't have manufacturing in Michigan yet, but had some regional manufacturers come in. We had some people talking about carbon and climate. We had Carpenters Union coming in and talk about their emerging training programs in mass timber. So really, and obviously some of our academics at MSU and at Michigan Tech talking about some of the research they're doing and why it's exciting. But we only allowed people 4 minutes to present, really just to keep the energy up. I wanted people to end the year feeling like, wow, there is a lot going on with mass timber in Michigan. I am a part of this. I'm not in it alone. And now I'm really excited to move into 2023, knowing that I can be a part of helping this to grow. And people responded really well to this event. It wasn't a heavy lift for them to be there. It was only like 2/3 of a day, but they got a lot of information, but not bogged down in too much detail. So it was a lot of fun. We also do provide technical assistance. We don't have a formal technical assistance program, but we get a lot of calls and we field a lot of calls. So basically I and Dr. George Berghorn work on that together. Depending on the topic, you know, folks will call us and we'll do what we can to help them. And then if it's beyond our capacity, then we refer out often to Woodworks, as you all know, is the nonprofit organization that really provides technical assistance and education to folks working on building with wood. But we love when we get these calls and we're able to help. For one thing that we're able to do, for example, is really provide some technical assistance around building code. So we had a project in Michigan that was in design, and the architect team was about to submit it to the local authority having jurisdiction, and they did that. And the authority said, hey, they did a preliminary with them actually. And the authority said, I really have a lot of problems with this mass timber. We've never done this before. You know, it looks like your building is aligned with the Michigan Building Code, but there's this statute from 1936 that pertains to schools. This was a school building that pertains to school buildings and the use of mass timber. And I'm interpreting this as saying you can't use mass timber on this school project. And this was a project where the students and the school district had gone through like a deep community engagement process, and they really wanted mass timber in this building. So it was kind of like not going to be an option for it to be a no from the building department. So we were able to offer some support, helping the architect connect with the American Wood Council and their building codes experts. We were able to help them make a case for why this was a good idea and why this code, why this statute shouldn't supersede state building code. We showed up at a hearing with them, we did all those things with them, and they did most of the heavy lifting and amazing work themselves and did a really strong argument. And then they were able in the appeals process to convince the local board that yes, this should move forward. But again, we were kind of there cheering them along, providing resources, plugging in, and just there to help. And that's a type of thing we might provide technical assistance with. Another thing might be, somebody says, oh, I have some questions about, floor assembly. Can you provide me some information on, to help me understand how that works? And be like, yes, so we can talk to you. And then here's a paper you can read. And then here's another resource somebody you can talk to. So very helpful just for people to know, like, we have a resource that we can go to. And then really, I don't have another term for this other than like matchmaking. I spend a lot of time being like, hey, you're working on this. Oh, do you know this company over here? You should talk. Let me introduce you. Oh, you need a supplier for mass timber. Well, here's kind of the list of all of them. Here's what I know about what this one provides versus this one. Oh, you want me to introduce you to someone there? Okay, here you go. Or even talking to folks who are interested in manufacturing or fabricating mass timber in Michigan, really trying to, if I hear someone over here saying, I'm thinking about doing this, and I hear someone over here say, I'm thinking about doing this, I usually will say, can I introduce the two of you? Because maybe you want to talk about doing this together. So really just trying to find ways to connect the people who need to be connected in order to get stuff done. And it's like a very soft thing to do, right? It's not a hard skill or a hard action, but it's like so like weirdly important and you don't always think of it. And then we're also working on, we have some additional funding from our Michigan Department of Natural Resources to create a Michigan Mass Timber Resource Guide. It'll be online. The resources will be useful to people not just in Michigan, but we will focus, we're going to have some information about this is how, if you're going to work on making a mass timber building, here are some things you should consider. Here's some technical resources. Here's some case studies, and then like, here's a project inventory of all of the mass timber buildings in the Great Lakes region and the list of everyone of all the different companies on the project team and whether they're licensed to work in Michigan, it's resources like that, some resources about sustainability. So really just trying to provide some additional learning opportunities that are online and readily available for folks. And then finally, we've been engaging on policy in a variety of different ways. The first and most obvious and of no surprise to anyone in this webinar, I'm sure, is on the building codes. So Michigan is currently still on the 2015 Michigan Building Code, which is based on 2015 International Building Code, which, as many of you will know, acknowledges cross-laminated timber and allows for it, but is not the most up-to-date set of building codes as they relate to mass timber. So we've been working with our state building codes agency, as well as with a large group. It's not formal like a coalition, but a large group of industry and NGO stakeholders to move forward. We want to get Michigan onto the 2021 International Building Code version. We've made some headway there, and now Michigan is in the process of developing its overall 2021 Michigan Building Code. It had been working on 2018, but it had been taking a really long time, and the agency recently said we're just going to put that on the shelf and move to 2021. I believe that decision had something to do, in part, but not all, but in part with a very loud and persistent ask for Michigan to get the 2021 IBC into our code. So now they're just working on the 2021 code. Now, of course, because that's happening, we're working on getting some of the 2024 mass timber elements of the International Building Code into our 2021 code. So, you know, we worked with a variety of different stakeholders to get a proposal in when there was a call for proposals from the Bureau of Construction Codes to inform the 2021 building code draft. And when that comes up for public comment, we'll work on getting people, you know, connected with opportunities to make public comments and submit comments. So we're just going to continue working on that. Michigan Healthy Climate Plan. This is an initiative of our governor, Governor Gretchen Whitmer. It was finished and released in April of 2021 on Earth Day. The development of this plan was a long process and began in, I'm sorry, let me think of the year. I think it began in 2019 or 2020. I'm going to say 2020. And there were a bunch of working groups set up in different areas to create recommendations to go into this document, ultimately the Michigan Healthy Climate Plan. One of the groups was focused on natural and working lands, and another one was focused on like buildings and housing. People in the natural and working lands group before I came on in July of 2021 had been working on mass timber and trying to figure out how to make recommendations related to mass timber. And I was able to tag onto that group when I arrived. And together we were able to ultimately get into the Michigan Healthy Climate Plan language that cites mass timber as an important part of a net zero carbon strategy for Michigan. So there's one, I pulled one quote there on the right. The language is not very specific, and the language of the plan in general is pretty high level. It's not very specific, and I think there's going to be a supplemental implementation plan, but this says, you know, support and promote tools that expand the use of mass timber as a sustainable building material. And that's a big win, because now, you know, as anytime we're making a policy ask related to mass timber in Michigan, we can say our Michigan Healthy Climate Plan calls out mass timber. So, you know, there's something in our policy document right now saying we want this. So that's one good reason. So it kind of gives cover to anybody who's feeling shy about advancing mass timber policies in Michigan. Similarly, our city of Lansing, again, that's our capital city. That's the city next to East Lansing, where Michigan State University. It also happens to be the city where I live. Recently, like very recently, adopted a sustainability action plan. It also cites mass timber as a strategy and really kind of leaned on the language of the Michigan Healthy Climate Plan to put something in this plan. It's absolutely the first city sustainability plan in Michigan that I'm aware of that calls out mass timber specifically. If anyone on this call is aware of other local like sustainability or climate action plans that call out mass timber anywhere in the country, I know there's some in Europe. I would love to know. I'm just very excited to learn about others. And then interestingly, and we had nothing to do with this, but our Ann Arbor Public School District, Ann Arbor, Michigan is where the University of Michigan is, very progressive city, issued requests for proposals for multiple K through 12 schools recently. They have a large schools bond that's going to be funding school renovations and replacements and new construction for many years to come. And the most recent round of RFPs that they issued, and I believe this is going to be the case for all of them moving forward, specifies mass timber. It doesn't say you have to use mass timber for the whole thing, but it does say something along the lines, and I'm paraphrasing, the building should feature visible mass timber as a structural element, at least somewhere in the building, essentially. And that is very cool. I think that's going to be a great model for other cities or districts that want to specify for mass timber in requests for proposals for upcoming construction projects. So we were really happy to learn that. And again, that was one that kind of came by surprise. Oh, cool. And then finally, we've been engaging, hopefully some of you have too, on the 2023 U.S. Farm Bill. The Farm Bill was in 2018. Thanks to Senator Debbie Stabenow of Michigan and some of her collaborators, had the Timber Innovations Act as part of it, and that provided some funding and prioritization for mass timber, mostly on the manufacturing and production side. So we're hoping that we can find some ways to get more mass timber friendly language into this 2023 Farm Bill. Okay, so now I'm going to pivot to how we use what we learn as we're out in the community conducting stakeholder engagement and outreach and, hearing people's questions when we host a webinar or an event, or when we host a tour with them, how we're using that information to help us think about, as a university, what can we do on the research and education side to help address barriers, to remove gaps, or to leverage kind of opportunities that aren't quite glued together yet. So I'll talk a little bit about that. I'm just going to, in doing so, I'm just going to share a few examples of our research. This is not an exhaustive list of the research that we're conducting at MSU on mass timber. There's actually quite a bit more, but these are the ones that are really outreach informed, and I'm excited to highlight them right now. So on the side of the equation that relates to mass timber manufacture, we're doing a couple of different things. One thing is, we've learned from forest products industry stakeholders, people who are work in manufacturing, existing mass timber manufacturers who are not in our region and perhaps not even in the US. They don't feel ready to locate their mass timber manufacturing facility in a place until they know that they have a reliable supply of wood, obviously, and reliable access to adjacent industry needs like connectors and transportation and adhesives. Oh, and labor, they want to know all of that. And they also want to know that the demand exists for the product that they're going to make. And they want to know, how much, what type, what timeline, all of those things. So in response to hearing that many times, we are working with the Michigan Department of Natural Resources. They provided us with some funding, our team with some funding, to conduct a mass timber supply chain analysis for Michigan, so to inform prospective mass timber manufacturers who may want to locate in Michigan, as well as an accompanying demand survey that's going to poll demand in 8 states in the Great Lakes region, including New York, to really understand, like, over the next 5 to 10 years, how much and what type of mass timber might we be seeing needed by the AEC industry and developers, so that a manufacturer locating here could be ready for that. We'll start having those, we're going to start having those insights rolling out a little bit in early April, and then most of them kind of in the early summer. So excited to be able to share that, and that will be information that will be readily available. We're also, one of the things that we've been hearing a lot is people really want mass timber made from Michigan wood. I've been actually surprised at how many times people in the AEC industry, as well as developers, say, why can't I get any mass timber that's made with Michigan wood? And, so it's as part of an effort to kind of grease the skids, so to speak, for getting mass timber manufacture in Michigan that would use some Michigan wood. We're going to pilot Michigan sourced and made nail laminated timber in 2 projects in the Michigan Upper Peninsula. And this is funded by a U.S. Forest Service Wood Innovations grant. So the reason for this is that, nail laminated timber is a type of mass timber that doesn't require adhesive. It doesn't require a hydraulic press. It doesn't require a large brick and mortar, that's mass timber humor, brick and mortar factory to make it in. So it doesn't require that huge upfront capital investment that a factory requires. Instead, you can make nail laminated timber panels on the construction site or in a simple warehouse near the construction site, using just small teams of people and basically nail guns to nail it together, using a design that's been created and signed off on by a structural engineer. So we're excited to just kind of demonstrate, like, hey, we can use Michigan wood in a type of mass timber in Michigan right now, and hopefully get people excited about the fact that that has happened. And hopefully, and our hope is that that excitement will also help a mass timber manufacturer see that it would be great to locate here. So that's part of it. So we'll be doing a lot of communication and storytelling around those pilots, which we're going to be launching those pilots this spring or early summer too. So on the construction side, some of our outreach informed research projects are, this first one, we're just kicking off now. We are with a $650,000 National Science Foundation grant. We are working with Henry Ford College in Detroit, as well as in partnership with some colleges and universities across the United States, as well as a large amount of AEC industry stakeholders to inform this process to design mass timber design, engineering, and construction curriculum modules that existing AEC courses can drop in, so that students in 2-year and 4-year programs can have exposure to mass timber concepts early and readily. So this, we're thrilled to be able to do this work, and part of the process is a really deep collaboration with industry. So on March 30th in Portland, the day after the International Mass Timber Conference, we're going to be hosting some conversations to inform the development of the curriculum. We're going to be using a process called DACUM. It literally means developing a curriculum. It's a facilitated conversation to really get insights from AEC industry stakeholders into what kinds of skills and experience and talent do they need incoming employees in certain types of jobs, say like architecture associate or, construction manager, different types of jobs at different levels. What types of skills do they need those people to have if they're going to take on mass timber projects? What's the difference and what needs to be added to those job descriptions in order to bring the right types of candidates, and therefore what types of education do those people need that we can include in our curriculum? So that's something that we're really looking forward to. If you are an architect, a structural engineer, a GC or construction manager, or an installer who's completed at least one mass timber project, and you're going to be in Portland on March 30th and you would like to participate in one of these conversations, please contact me after this so I can talk with you about it and get you more information. We'd love to have you. And then finally, Dr. Berghorn in our construction management program has been working on a mass timber cost prediction tool. So one of the things that we're really aware of is that the ways that we need to estimate the cost of mass timber construction projects are quite different from the ways that we estimate steel and concrete projects. And we find that companies are often a little bit at a loss as to how to do this, particularly to think through some of the construction site efficiencies that they might be able to achieve by estimating correctly. So we've created this cost prediction tool. It's not on the market or out there and available for use yet, but I hope someday that it will be. Okay, so that's what we're doing. And now I just want to talk a little bit about where we are in Michigan with mass timber demand in particular at this moment. Many of you have probably seen this map. This is national demand. This is the map produced by Woodworks. And we know that demand nationally is increasing for mass timber. We know that from 2018, we went from I think that's backwards. That should be 439 projects. Please excuse me. 439 mass timber projects that were either complete or under construction or in design to 1,502 by June of 2020. So that's more than 3 times increase. We're expecting mass timber demand in the United States to continue to probably double every 2 years until the mid-2030s. So we're going to see a lot more mass timber. And in Michigan, we think that's going to be the case as well. So we have I'm tracking right now about 37 projects that are either definitely going to be built with mass timber, have been completed using mass timber, or where project teams are working with clients that want mass timber and they're working in earnest to figure out the right path to deliver it. These are all different kinds of projects: schools, live work, multifamily and affordable housing, workforce training centers, churches, community centers, veterinary clinic, and a hotel. So all different kinds of buildings. So all different types of developers and owners are looking at mass timber as an option. And I find that so cool. Perhaps even more cool is that these are located all over our state. I had thought when I started this position that I would see mass timber demand maybe in Detroit and Ann Arbor and Grand Rapids. Yeah, I'm seeing it in those places, but I'm also seeing it in really rural areas in the Upper Peninsula like Newberry and St. Ignace, and in the small city of Marquette. And this tells me that mass timber interest is growing in a real way, and that it's just going to keep going up. On a map, it looks like this. These are where we have completed projects. or projects that are already under construction. And this is where people are working on planning and developing projects right now all over the state. I don't think there's enough pins because I couldn't fit all the pins into the small space of the map, but you get the idea. They're all over the state, in our really dense urban areas, in some of our smaller cities, in rural areas, all the way up into the Upper Peninsula. So we really think that the outreach, engagement, policy, and industry-informed research that we're doing has a role to play in continuing to build this momentum. And we're very excited to be playing the role that we're playing. And just to recap key practices and activities that I covered here, if you have a mass timber building in your community, leverage that thing as a learning laboratory. Create and convene opportunities to learn and collaborate. If you hear needs in the community, can you find someone to work with who can create opportunities for people to come together and learn together or network? Engage on policy, that can just mean briefing your legislators on what mass timber is so that their imaginations can run wild. It can mean getting engaged on codes. I know New York has a climate plan that's probably ripe for some mass timber influence, get engaged on policy. And then really match research to needs identified in outreach, or industry and policy folks, talk to researchers and tell them what your problems are and ask them to identify research projects to help address those problems. It's a two-way street, right? So we really want to make sure that, when we have barriers, we're using research informed and data-driven methods to remove those barriers so that we can do things that really have an impact and really matter. So that's what I have for you formally today, but I'm hoping that there's a lot of questions and comments in the chat so we can actually talk a little bit, because that's my favorite part. Thank you so much for your attention, and this is how to reach me. And I know that Katrina will be sharing out the slides, so you'll have my contact information forever and ever. Thank you.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for covering so many dimensions of mass timber and where it's the practice that you're engaging in at MSU and how that is advancing. Thank you very much. We have one question. There was some chatter in the chat, but there's some questions about New York and ESF, and so Paul and others were able to answer those. But Jody had a question about, do you see any downside to scaling? And she doesn't like that word, but downside to scaling mass timber throughout the building industry.
Jody, can you unmute and talk to me a little?
Sure, absolutely.
Hi. So tell me what kinds of downsides you might be thinking of.
Actually, I was just opening a door that I had no idea was what might be behind it. I just know that when we look at something as an answer, we tend to scale it whether or not it makes sense. So I guess it's a little less of downsides and a little more of what should we be careful about when we're talking about employing mass timber. Are there situations that you would recommend we don't use mass timber?
Yeah, I mean, I would say this. As I said, I don't have a construction or design background. So in terms of, from a technical perspective, thinking about applications, I'm kind of like, I can't really speak to that. I think one downside that people often feel concerned about is, the slippery slope of using more wood. Does that lead to deforestation? And so I think it's always worth mentioning that in a conversation about mass timber, right? And I come from a background in advocacy with organizations that were, had positions really against doing forest management and against cutting trees for the most part. And I had to really learn a lot about how forests work and how trees work. And what I'll say is this, we need forests. We need healthy forests, and we need more forests. And, one way of continuing to have healthy forests and to have more forests is to manage so there's working forests that actually we use and source wood products from, is to manage our working forests in a good way so that we are continuing to plant and grow more trees to replace and expand on the ones that we use. We want to be sure that we're planting new forests in places where it makes sense. And sometimes that's, adjacent to agricultural land. Sometimes it's on land that's underutilized, or has been converted from some other use. Plant more trees. Those can be working forests too, right? Don't convert forests to less beneficial uses like parking lots if we, when we can avoid this. And then also make sure that we're preserving some of our wild forests that are not working forests as wild forests. So it's all about having smart forestry practices that are really thinking about carbon and climate resilience, wildlife habitat, clean air, clean water, all of those things that forests do. But so what I understand about forestry in North America right now is that we're currently growing significantly more wood each year than we are harvesting, and Dovetail Partners and our MSU Forest Carbon and Climate Plan are my favorite sources on this information if you're wanting to look up for more. But we're growing significantly more wood in North American forests than we're harvesting each year. Even if we built all of our buildings out of mass timber, according to research that's been done on this subject, we would still have enough growth and opportunity for growth and to have healthy, sustainable forests. So we're not really seeing that as a downside. I absolutely will say we need to keep having really good forest management practices and be vigilant about maintaining them so that we're doing our forestry sustainably. But because mass timber, because wood building products use or emit significantly less carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases to produce and then store carbon in themselves in their wood, they're already an important part of kind of a carbon and climate solution. So we just need to make sure that our sourcing is smart forever, right? In terms of on the use side and downsides, I mean, we don't want to be in a situation like nothing is a panacea, right? We want to use the right materials for the right use in the right contexts. And for me, that's kind of beyond the scope of what I'm able to speak to, but I know there's plenty of designers and like life cycle analysis people who are working together to think about that. Like the EC3 tool is a tool that kind of looks at that. Like what's the right combination of materials for this building based on design needs, use needs, and carbon and climate factors. And I think we should always be very thoughtful. And I also want to say, and another thing, I also want to say, people often have the all or nothing mentality of like, oh, the building has to be all mass timber. And if it's not all mass timber, it's not pure or something. Hybrid buildings are a reality, and we're going to keep having hybrid buildings. And so people shouldn't be afraid to use mass timber in combination with other materials. That's
a perfect dovetail to John Pamilio from Colgate University. His question is there a certain amount of wood that needs to be in new construction to have it be considered a mass timber building?
Not in my opinion, but I mean, I would say, I think, is there anyone who's a designer or who wants to speak to that on the call? Come on, don't be shy. You can just unmute.
So I'm not a designer. This is Paul.
Hi, Paul.
So I'm not a designer, but I will say, one of the things that distinguishes mass timber building is this different behavior in terms of its fire resistivity, right? So what we're really distinguishing is we've built buildings in the past out of timber, but because of the size of the elements involved, they didn't have as much resistance in the instance of fire. So the code is very specific about the thickness that the timber has to be to behave like a log that slowly chars as opposed to burning quickly. And so if you wanted an answer to exactly how much the code thicknesses for things like CLT panels and glulam, et cetera, is all laid out pretty clearly in these new codes that have been developed with this focus on life safety involved. So I hope that's helpful. And maybe Sandra, if you want to expand on that a little bit as well.
I think I'll say that's a really good explanation for like how do we differentiate wood building materials and timber building materials from mass timber building materials in part. But I think maybe John is also asking, like, what percentage of your building needs to be made of mass timber materials in order to be a mass timber building? And I don't think anyone has defined that in a specific way.
So I just happen to be aware the Council on Tall Buildings
Get out of here.
has been working on a draft for a definition of a mass timber building. And this has come about in part because of this arms race to putting up taller and taller buildings, and who wants to be able to claim the tallest mass timber building, and how much of it has to be mass timber to claim the title of a tallest mass timber building in the world. And so I think that's in draft form, but it's actually being put together in part with Paul Kramer's input. And so some of you remember Paul Kramer from the previous presentation last week. So he's been an actively engaged citizen in the development of that standard. So, but I wish I knew the details, but I don't know what the numbers are.
That is super interesting. Thank you for sharing that, Paul. I think that points me to something we talk about a lot at MSU, because, Michigan is, we are a lower density state. We have a few cities that have high rises, but, most of our cities do not have tall high rises. And if they have them, there's not that many of them. And we're not going to be building super tall here for the most part. And I think one of the things we say a lot is the tall buildings are really super cool and we all love them very much. And don't forget about the boring buildings. We call them the boring buildings. Focus on the boring buildings. There's a lot of opportunity to use mass timber in all kinds of different ways, and 3-story, 4-story, 5-story, 6-story buildings. And we should be absolutely considering mass timber for those applications.
Thank you. And one last question from Bruce Ward. Are there published design manuals that cover mass timber construction methods? And Nicolette has already answered. She thinks Woodworks publishes one.
There are a number of different design manuals published by Woodworks and other entities as well. Yes, so there are absolutely formalized design standards and principles for mass timber that are published, and the publications are updated frequently. Does anyone want to say exactly what those are? They will all be in our mass timber resource guide when it goes up in the summer.
And there's a lot of excitement about that, I'll tell you. Paul's put one in the chat.
Thanks, Paul.
And Nicolette has said she finds your work on educating clients and elected officials to be interesting, as they are typical barriers in what she's seen to utilizing mass timber. They just don't know about it, so they don't see it as a viable option.
Yeah, I mean, when people don't know about a thing, they don't know about a thing. You gotta meet people where they are and help them learn about the thing. I will tell you, I have never spoken to a single person in my job since I've started at MSU who I've explained what mass timber is and had them be like, oh, I don't think so. I've never had it happen. So people are like, oh, that's really cool. I'm very excited to learn more. Tell me more. And then the next time I see them, they're like, oh, I told so-and-so about mass timber. They didn't know about it either. So I think, it's a thing that can capture people's imagination. And one thing that I didn't mention particularly from an advocacy perspective, I find mass timber to be so much fun to work on because in my experience, it is rather non-polarizing. You can find something for everyone, right? If you're talking with a legislator who represents a rural area that might be more red, they can get, if they have forests, they can be very excited about rural forest economic development opportunities. If you're talking with somebody in a community, like I mentioned earlier, Ann Arbor, which is probably one of our most progressive cities in Michigan, they're interested in community development, they're building new buildings, they have a sustainability plan, they need to be executing against that. They get excited about the sustainability and climate value proposition of mass timber. And so I really enjoy trying to find opportunities for bipartisan collaboration on mass timber. I think we need more of those, and I think this is kind of an easy one to find those opportunities around.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Sandra, for your presentation today. Some kudos and great points in the chat for you. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen today to just close us out. But thank you all very much for attending today. And if you want more, there's more coming. So we'll have more MassTimber sessions at the actual conference. Registration did close yesterday, but I'm opening it for a half-an-hour window, and you're the only ones who know about that. So starting at 1:30, if you didn't get a chance to register for the conference, virtual sessions on MassTimber will be available, including a keynote. And so you can register at 1:30. It'll be open again. And also there's other things, even if you are registered already, there's other things that we need. There's a student poster competition, as I mentioned to some early on the call. We do need some judges. So if you're interested in deepening your participation at the conference and engaging with some students, please send me an email, and I'll put my email in the chat as well. Here it comes right now. And we also have a clean energy career fair. So in the spirit of building and broadening the tent that is related to MassTimber, green building, and clean energy and renewable energy, we invite you. Participation is completely free for both employers who have jobs available, for job seekers, for education and training providers, and those seeking education and training. So please join us. Now the questions I get all the time. You can use this session to self-report to your accrediting body of choice. There will be certificates of attendance being sent right after this. And then we'll send a feedback for both the presentation today and the event. So please take a couple minutes, just a couple questions, really easy to click through that. PDH certificates will be sent the week of March 6th. We work to trim the videos and get the recordings out as soon as possible afterward. And so now that we'll have all three, we expect those will coming out soon. I hope before the conference next week, but no promises there because there's a lot for a few of us here. And if you have any questions, you can reach out at nysgreenbuilding@gmail.com and get a hold of us there. So thank you all very much for your attendance today. Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Sandra, for your presentation. It was wonderful. And more soon. Thank you, everyone. Goodbye.